So good morning to those in the US, and then good afternoon to those in Tanzania and in Ghana and in India. We are pleased to have you join us for our third Yield Shop series. I think we also have on the line Dr. Amo Mensah from the Challenges Group of Ghana, who will be partnering with for our next webinar, which is going to be on financial management tips for agripreneurs. Today, we are going to be focusing on marketing strategies. And as we all know, marketing is an important ingredient when it comes to building of businesses. And we are pleased to have a very dynamic speaker and a leader in business who will be sharing some insights with us. So without wasting any more of your time, I'll please ask Chinwe if you could please introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you, Kwame. I'm going to be very brief because I know we've already waited 20 minutes, and I first want to thank everyone for your patience as we worked out the technological issues. But Venkat I'm sure he'll introduce himself, but I just wanted to highlight that we're very privileged to have him because he's coming with experience from 4 major regions of the world. So Asia, different parts of Asia, Europe, and as well as the US. So think about what he says in the context of exchanging best practices, cross-fertilization of ideas, and applying how you can apply some of the lessons learned and best practices that he's bringing to your context in your country, whether it's in Ghana or Tanzania. So without saying much more, I'd like to thank Venkat for preparing the presentation for today's webinar, and to welcome him to join us.
Thank you so much, Chinwe. Thank you so much, Kwame. I really appreciate this opportunity to share some of my experiences and perspectives on this very important topic, digital marketing, and especially for small businesses, and even more so for businesses which are more in the form of startups or maybe early stage, I would say early stage small businesses, because the emphasis is always different depending on which stage of the growth curve an organization is. A very good morning to all the participants who are joining in from US, and a very good afternoon to all the participants who are joining in from Africa. Brief introduction about me. Right now I joined from India. It's just about late evening in this side of the world. A quick introduction about me. I have worked for about 2 decades plus, mostly in India and South Asia. I do have experience of running businesses which had significant business and client exposure into the US and Europe at various points in time. And more recently, over the last 10 to 12 years, I have been directly engaged in starting up businesses, commercial businesses, new ventures, venture investments, even nonprofits. Nonprofits in the field of education, working with youth, especially youth in right from grade 5 all the way up to students in universities, and the socioeconomic strata or socioeconomic backgrounds of many of these youngsters used to be from semi-urban or rural areas, and many of these youngsters were also at risk for various reasons. I had the opportunity to work with many of these challenging opportunities, youngsters who came from very difficult experiences, and I was very glad to see how their resilience and with some guidance, they were able to make good success stories out of those opportunities. I also have been a management consultant for a very long time. I had the opportunity to work with KPMG and IBM and Accenture. I have advised businesses, large businesses, multinational corporations across the length and breadth of the world. And I have been able to take some of these learnings and benefits even to small businesses and even startups and new ventures. Specifically about ventures, even right now we have exposure to a portfolio of about 13 companies, and I'm glad to share one of them is actually in what we call it as precision agriculture. There's a bunch of youngsters who come in from graduate college, it's an engineering graduate college, and they are right now using drones to do mapping of crops. And right now they're in the process of devising algorithms wherein those photographs can be interpreted with intelligent algorithms to understand what kind of crop-specific intervention needs to be made, whether it's for nutrition or for pest control or so on and so forth. So yes, it's a pretty interesting space that's across the world and not just in India. And uh, each of these ventures or each of these commercial businesses or each of these large businesses that I have been part of in various capacities over the last so many years, most of them have been um, um, they have been engaged with this digital marketing space in various capacities and for various reasons. And I'm very eager to share some of those experiences over the next 30 to 35 minutes. But then, before I kind of delve into the topic, I just have two broad spaces I wish to cover through this 30 to 35 minutes. First of all, I wish to kind of draw a very quick comparative between traditional marketing and digital marketing, and what could be the similarities and overlaps between these spaces and what could be the dissimilarities. And of course, I would be very keen to uh, well a bit into some of those digital marketing techniques that are available, and especially digital marketing techniques and those nuances which may be more relevant for small businesses or startups, and if so, in the space of agri space or agri venture space. But then before I get into whatever I wish to share, I'm very keen to know from participants, especially the entrepreneurs, specifically two things. What has your experience been in the digital marketing space so far? And if you could pick up one specific initiative wherein you put in your maximum effort and took that particular digital marketing initiative all the way onto the ground. And if for any reason it failed, if you could identify what was the reason it failed. So essentially one example of a digital marketing technique which you spent maximum effort on, and if at all it failed, why it failed. If two or three of the participants could share these perspectives, then I can ensure that my rest of my talk is actually more relevant to the circumstances all of us are in.
Yes, honestly, for what we are doing now, we have not really used digital marketing because because of the level of distribution, the production level is lower, and already we have put ourselves in the local network, marketing network, local marketing system. So that makes it pretty easier. If you go digital, you're going to have the case where we'll have a lot of people wanting our product that we may not be able to supply. So what we have done is to be able to very firmly put ourselves in the local supply of needs. So anytime they need it, they just by way of phone calls, that is the extent that we've gone. By way of phone calls, they get to us and then we supply them.
So, Venkat, I don't know if you heard Godfred's response.
Yes, Shanvi, I heard. The voice was breaking in between, but I could get the essence of the inputs that Godfred shared. Yes.
Okay. It sounds like he has not used it, not because he thinks it's not effective, but he doesn't think he can meet the demand that it would create.
Understood. Yes, I hear that. Anybody else, any other participant may wish to share their perspective?
So I can share mine, if you don't mind.
Samuel, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Samuel.
Okay, so digital marketing is a major tool being used in Ghana here for businesses. So we as a company, made some publications. We have a page, and through the page, so many people have contacted us, placed orders for us to be supplied. But it has also helped us to keep in touch with our customers because they begin to see the value chain of what we do. The key challenge for digital marketing is, as mentioned earlier, once you try to go global, and you start placing, doing the various advertisements and other things, it creates the necessary opportunity and the demand. And one of the key things we are doing as a company is to manage the demand so that we don't, our supply is not enough. So we don't create a necessary demand where we cannot be able to supply. So digital marketing for me, it's the next big thing. It's good, but the most important thing is as a company, we are looking at it of being able to manage it in terms of our PR relationship and our market, so that it doesn't mean that anybody can also go there and paste anything on the company that will have a repelling effect on our activities. But so far, it's been the best. And one of the key things we have used is Facebook as more than the others like Twitter and Instagram, but we have used Facebook more compared to the rest. So that's my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. That's definitely a great insight. Okay. So the two inputs that here I hear from Gottfried and Samuel, essentially from Gottfried's side, if I understand right, the demands of digital marketing itself can at times be overwhelming, especially for the small business or the small entrepreneur. And even so, entrepreneurs in the space of agribusiness, uh, agribusiness is a very large space. It can actually be co-located across different kind of economic setups. But generally speaking, agribusinesses do tend to be in spaces wherein you may not necessarily have access to the best of the technologies or the best of the circumstances or the best of the infrastructures. So at times the circumstance itself can be a bit daunting for the entrepreneur to take on to digital marketing. So in fact, this is one of the very similar concern I get to hear whenever we move into similar circumstances, even in this part of the world, be it India or South Asia. The second point that came from Samuel is, what do we use digital marketing for? And is it for maintaining relationships? Is it for building the brand or a goodwill about the organization or its people or its products or its operations? Or it could be even more transactional. Is it about creating demand? And also, how do I keep pace if I tend to create more demand, and this more demand could be in terms of more numbers or more types of products, or maybe demand coming from different geographies wherein I may not be able to service at this particular point in time. So many times it creates too much of a dilemma as well as to, if I create demand, can my supply chain respond to it? And therefore, is there something about digital marketing which gives us some sort of a tool wherein this supply demand mismatch can be balanced if we do digital marketing in a very intelligent manner? So yes, so there are another 3 or 4 issues which typically are observed in the space of small businesses and rural businesses, but I'm sure we'll get into that at an appropriate point in time. But then I'm very keen to kind of put digital marketing in perspective, specifically with respect to traditional marketing. And many times, irrespective of the fact that there may be different values or different principles which are driving digital marketing, it's also important to understand who are the individuals who are driving this space of digital marketing, and what kind of technologies, what kind of philosophies that they're putting it into the space, and even what kind of pricing systems and costing systems they're putting into this place. And therefore, what are the kind of backgrounds these individuals are coming from, and how do they see traditional versus digital? Of course, there could be multiple views about it, but there are 2 or 3 significant views that I wish to bring to perspective. Number one, while there are different methods and media which are adopted for traditional marketing, be it print or broadcast or direct mail or telemarketing or even televisions, or whichever way you want to look at, a significant reason why traditional marketing adopted this whole process of outreach to its customers was to build a brand and build a cushion. And a principal approach which many of the traditional philosophies took was that anything we do to improve our image, it is an accumulation process, it's an accretive process, and it's not necessarily time sensitive. So therefore, if today I run a brand campaign using a traditional marketing method, I may not necessarily expect an immediate demand for that particular pitch, but the rub-off is going to stay, and the expectation is there is certain degree of tenacity to this rub-off, and therefore even if I make that marketing spend today, and if I'm not necessarily trying to monetize this marketing spend in the next 6 months, even if I do it a year later, it should still be fine. For example, the way I build a Pepsi brand, a PepsiCo brand, or maybe a Coke brand. Whereas the same set of individuals, when they moved in, even the large companies or small companies, from the traditional marketing to the digital marketing, whatever be the reasons, there seems to be a significant belief that digital marketing is all about timing. And digital marketing is in a space which is dominated by individuals who are generally known as millennials. And in this space, attention span is short. The need to see result is also immediate. And therefore, if I do anything in the digital marketing space, the return on the investment has to necessarily be immediate. And therefore, I also need to design everything in a very short time span. Therefore, yesterday in the traditional marketing space, I could invest money to build a brand and not get too worried if my sales had moved positively in response to that investment in the next 3 or 6 months. In the digital marketing space, people operate to a very different philosophy. Now, the question is, how does it matter to the entrepreneur or the agribusiness person? Well, it matters in a significant way, because if I go to a Google AdWords, or if I go to, ultimately, whether I'm a small business entrepreneur, an agripreneur, or I'm a large company like a Coke or Pepsi or whatever that might be, we still go onto the same platforms. We go onto Google Ads, we go onto the websites, we go onto the blogs. That space is common to everybody. And if in that particular space, if somebody is outbidding you for an AdWord by giving, by quoting a price which is 4 times or 5 times, there's no way the entrepreneur can compete. So this dynamic is something which is very important to understand, that in digital marketing space, there is a pressure of time and which kind of outbids everybody out. So the one who is more hurried tends to spend more. And this is a fundamental philosophical difference that comes up in the traditional versus digital marketing space. And I'll explain this through an example later on in one of the slides. Just to kind of take forward this particular point, traditional marketing also kind of sort of operated on 4 principles. Ultimately, it was either about building a brand or kind of augmenting the sales. And of course, both these efforts could be in an offline version or an online version. And yes, irrespective of whether my philosophy is about building a brand or trying to be more transactional and responding to what's called as a millennial philosophy, there are certain shifts that are happening where the philosophy has not shifted, but the medium is still shifting, for example, mobile. But that said, one has to really understand that the principal difference between the traditional and digital marketing is about timing. Traditional marketing is much more patient investment. Digital marketing tends to be a bit more restless and short-term investment. And that's, if we understand this point, I think from my perspective, I think we've got the principal difference between our traditional and digital marketing philosophy. But then let's get into what exactly is digital marketing. If you're really talking about this, let's have some definitions very clear. At a very simplistic level, it's all about telling something about your product or your proposition to either a customer or to a partner, either through a search engine or a website, or maybe certain social media platforms, or maybe even as something as basic as a mobile platform. From a small business person or from an agripreneur's perspective, I think it definitely is the best impact for the time that you could have spent versus what you might have done in a traditional business. Digital marketing definitely tends to be on a transaction to transaction basis, less expensive than traditional marketing. But then if you really look at the total cost of ownership, at times digital marketing can end up being much more expensive than traditional marketing. And I'll explain why. Further, the extent to which digital marketing allows targeting and customization, and therefore it also helps a small business person if there is a certain constraint on how much money I can spend, then this facility of extreme targeting and customization actually can help me get the best out of the investment I could ever make. That's the broad space I would like to define digital marketing as, and as some of the benefits that digital marketing can have. But then, as I mentioned, that at the face of it, all of us tend to feel that digital marketing is very inexpensive because it's all, even if something as simple as sending a message on a mobile or maybe a video on a mobile, it may or may not cost us much. But if we try to look at digital marketing space as a space wherein I'm actually competing even with the large players, and also the fact that if today a traditional marketing approach puts an ad in a newspaper, the customer goes to a newspaper to read news, and alongside the news, if he or she sees an advertisement, we may have their attention span. Whereas in the digital marketing space, the customer is there for various other reasons. They are there for the social interactions, they are there for the news, they are there for the entertainment, they're also there for many other things. And the attention span is so much more lesser. So the possibility of a futile expenditure in the digital marketing space is very high, despite the fact that the digital marketing transaction may be cheaper. And therefore, it is very important that we have good amount of clarity as to why are we adopting digital marketing channel, and what is the end outcome that we wish to have from that particular, either from the particular, I would say, pitch, or that particular iteration, or that particular run of a digital marketing initiative. So just to kind of break it down to next level of details, it may be very important to have clarity on who is the specific competition that particular campaign of digital marketing is targeting. So when I say campaign, if I decide that over the next 1 or 2 months, I'm going to spend, say, $100 on a specific digital marketing campaign, then I need to be very clear that what is that $100 is being spent on. And if I look back at after 3 months and want to introspect and come to a conclusion whether that $100 was spent to 70% efficiency or 90% efficiency, I need to be clear what should have happened, which makes me conclude that yes, I was 70% successful, or maybe I was 30% successful. And for arriving at that kind of a assessment, I would need to be clear who was I targeting or what was I targeting. For example, many times I may launch a product in a market, or I may launch, for example, I'm selling eggs. I'm an agripreneur. And the eggs that I sell are no different than the eggs that are being sold by any other person who is selling eggs. But the only difference that my eggs have is it comes in pack of 6. It comes in a better cushioned packaging, and it's not more than 2 days old, let's say. Now, it might be possible that, at least I'm going to give an example from India, let's say. In India, for example, there are certain beliefs. For example, I don't want to purchase eggs on a particular day. Now, in which case, everybody understands the benefit of my offering. Everybody understands what is it that I'm trying to offer to them. They also understand what is the relative advantage they have if they purchase the product from me versus somebody else. But the problem is I'm competing with a particular belief or a tradition. And many times, if I have clarity that my competition is not my competitor, but maybe a belief or a tradition that is being practiced in a particular house, it may be helpful, and therefore my campaign can be so much more directed. So I'm talking about that kind of a clarity. We already talked about what exactly is the definition of success. So when we say definition of success, it would be good to have clarity as to how many days do I wish this campaign to run, which spaces do I wish this campaign to run, which geography, what is the behavior, what is the specific competition I wish to target. So that is the kind of, if I have that kind of clarity, then it will also be easy for me to define whether I'm actually moving forward, and therefore am I achieving success or not. And of course, part of it also, it depends on what kind of channels I wish to use. Now the question is, how do we achieve clarity? Yes, we did talk about those measures of success, but then many times measures of success can tend to be a bit confusing, or they could tend to be a bit abstract, and therefore the ultimate, as I say, the ultimate measure of success for any digital marketing campaign, or for all that matter for any marketing campaign, has to be and is if it causes one or more of the following 3. Ultimately, it has to make sure the business and the economic model of our business is sustainable. In the sense, and what is sustainable? I'm not, the inflows that I'm having through my business or sale of product has to ultimately be more than my outflows. Whether over the next 1 month, 2 months, next 2 years, or next 3 years, ultimately any campaign has to lead me into that circumstance. If it is not causing that circumstance over the next 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, then one has to wonder whether we need to even go for that particular campaign or not. Second, long term. Much as everybody may like to say that digital marketing is short term, it is being targeted for a short term measure. One has to also understand that whatever we are achieving in that short term, it has to be a part of a larger long term story. To explain, if I am picking up a campaign in a village and I'm trying to address 15 families in that village, and this village may be having 50 families, and I have decided to target only 15 family members. And I feel that if I can have a positive influence with these 15 family members, over the next 1 year, the remaining 35 families in the village will also learn or maybe emulate those 15, and eventually I'll have a better ecosystem out there. So despite the fact that I'm maybe running a 2-month campaign to have a positive outcome with those 15 family members or 15 families, I also need to have a clarity as to how this is eventually going to rub off with the remaining 35. And that's the long-term story that always needs to be clear, even if I wish to approach digital marketing in a short term. So that's the spin, or that's the kind of thought I'm trying to convey. And yes, at the end of the day, I need to create a circumstance wherein the campaign needs to create the case for unhindered cash flows. For example, staying with the same thing, if suppose somebody on Tuesday doesn't want to purchase eggs, and if I were to change the behavior, if I were to change the purchasing pattern, or if I were to change the consumption pattern in some particular way to tide over that particular Tuesday crisis, that resolution should eventually lead to a situation wherein I'm not hitting that problem once again. And I'm not hitting the problem once again on the same issue. And therefore, I have found a solution which kind of bypasses this obstruction in potential purchase or cash flows. Maybe I'll explain this much better with another example later on, but that's the 3 broad objectives one necessarily needs to have if I'm to be sure that my digital marketing campaign is successful to a certain degree of threshold. Finally, we touched upon this, but then it can be a bit enticing, and it could be at times a bit misleading, because generally everybody tends to feel that digital marketing may be inexpensive. But one of the big cautions we have to exercise is there could be futile digital marketing expense, because the attention span tends to be low, and the same space tends to be shared by the large players as well as small players. And therefore, unlike the large brands who may not necessarily have so much of constraints and resources, at least for the small business person or for the agripreneur, the only way we can watch out for wasteful expenditure is having a very good clarity and approach, and adopting a very precise definitions and precise having very precise targets as to why do I wish to go for digital marketing. And there's another difference between digital marketing with large players versus digital marketing for the entrepreneurs or the small players being, most often than not, the large players use digital marketing for shifting perspectives, whereas the small players generally use digital marketing for a very transactional purpose. It's either for picking up a new customer, or for picking up a new demand, or making sure that particular sale is much more efficient. So these are more existential reasons for which a digital marketing is used by the small people, whereas the large players generally use it more for image management. At this point in time, just want to take a pause and check if there are any questions, or if there's any point I need to clarify.
So I wanted to ask this. Comparing the rates of digital marketing, and as you have explained, you need to be able to have a question. Sorry,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So digital marketing is more of a short term, I want to be very clear, whether digital marketing is of a short term but has a long term effect as compared to the traditional form of marketing. How will you delineate between the long term marketing strategy of digital marketing and the traditional market?
Yes, I would say that digital marketing, while it is done in a short-term time span, if I break the impact and if I connect it to a long-term story, so suppose I'm selling meat in 15 villages, and or my target market is 15 villages. Today I am selling meat only in 3 villages. Let's say, right? Now,
Yes.
now I need to. I'm of the view that after 1 year, I would wish to move my sales to another 3 villages, and these 3 villages, let's say, are 100 kilometers away, or maybe 50 kilometers away. Let's say. Today, I may not be able to reach them because I do not have that kind of infrastructure or that kind of a supply. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
But then, 1 year later, when I reach the next set of 3 villages, I need to. It would be good if there are at least 10 or 15 influencers in those next set of 3 villages who already know my product, or who have some feedback about how my current customers feel about my product early on. So even if they know about me for the previous 3 or 4 months, what happens is when I actually finally reach a situation when I can go to those next set of 3 villages and make my product available to them, at least there's a perspective, there's already some sort of a awareness that has been created. Now, how do I do that? So one option is I can start advertising, or I can start sharing information to the next set of those 3 villages, maybe into the 6 month or 7 month, but then I don't have resources. Now, what can I do? If I can pick up, let's say, 4 or 5 individuals in my current set of 3 villages who may have some relationships into those next set of 3 villages, and if I can actually enable them, and it's very simple. All that I'm going to do is maybe take a video of 4 or 5 of my customers, and I share those experiences, and or the customers share the experiences of my product, or maybe the manner in which actually I provide them service. I'm a person who gives them very customized service, very prompt service. I always resolve a problem very quickly, and maybe I'm capturing this particular experience from my customers in a small video, and I'm requesting my 3 families in this first set of 3 villages who have some relatives in this next set of 3 villages, saying, you know what, I am going there to those next set of 3 villages 1 year down the line. But I'm very keen that can you share these 3 videos with them? Now, it's actually, in a very simplistic term, just about sharing a video on a mobile medium. In a different manner, it's just nothing but digital marketing. Now, I'm investing my money today, maybe buying a smartphone and capturing those particular videos, and maybe a small editing software to maybe make those videos look very nice. And maybe that's all the investment that I'm making. It's a very short-term investment. But if I'm a bit intelligent and very clear as to why am I doing this, because part of this is also to share these experiences upfront to those next set of 3 villages through these 3 families who may have relationships there. That's how I can actually make a short-term exercise rub off onto a long-term impact. And that's the kind of approach digital marketing can potentially allow. I hope this particular example clarifies some of that particular delineation that you spoke about.
Yes, from my perspective, yes, it is. And it gives a clear indication of the approach of how you should be able to go about it. And from my point, what I really deduce is that within the value chain, then word of mouth become a key selling point in during your digital marketing, so that when you do the short videos, you can use the word of mouth sales to be able to propagate it and get to the other. Thank you so much for the explanation.
Thank you so much. Welcome. Next set of slides. This is specifically explaining what exactly ultimately is digital marketing landscape. And if one were to decide, fine, I do wish to get onto this bandwagon of digital marketing, and therefore I wish to have a digital strategy for my business, then what do I do next? What can I do as an entrepreneur? If suppose I have infinite resources, then and if I can adopt all the mechanisms and all the channels available, if ever, as part of digital marketing, then what is this landscape that is ever available to me? Well, at a very simplistic level, there are only 4 or 5 spaces one can be when in this whole digital marketing space. You can either be communicating your story through social media, or you could make it less social but more informative and more in-depth, which is through blogging. And in case of social media and blogging, then the direction of information is actually inside out, in the sense that the business sends the information out to the larger ecosystem. Whereas when you talk of, and that's the same in case of email, even in case of emails, but whereas in case of search engine optimization, or maybe where you're trying to make sure your information is accessible at a particular level of detail, which responds best to somebody who's searching, then the whole mechanism of information sharing becomes outside in. To explain, if I am searching for a good agriculture farm equipment repair person, so I am using tractors, and I wish to find out a good person who can repair my tractors, then somebody is searching, let's say, if at all that person has the wherewithal to go onto a website, or maybe get onto a search engine and search, then he may put search words as a tractor or a repair person or a mechanic or whatever that might be. And if, say, I'm a small business person who does provide these kind of services, but I'm in a village which is 50 kilometers away, at least I need to be sure that if somebody is searching with the name of the particular place, or maybe the particular district or a larger area, and maybe the kind of skill and maybe a particular kind of equipment, at least my information should prop up and be visible, if not in the first 10 items, at least in the 15th item. So in which case, when I'm doing a search engine optimization, essentially I'm appealing to the fact that individuals are themselves looking for information. All that I need to make sure is when they're looking for information, whichever spaces they're looking for that information, whichever time they're looking for this information, whichever manner in which they're looking for the information, if I am the person who can provide these services, this information should be at least in contention. So yes, so one way to look at entire digital marketing space is to choose which direction of information you wish to be in. You want to broadcast information, or you want to make sure you are sending out the right information to somebody who's looking. That's one way of looking at it. And of course, the principle which will help one choose as to which direction you wish to be part of being, if I have very limited resources, if I don't even have time to make a video or take a photograph and maintain a blog, or maybe maintain a Facebook page or a group, and if I can post it out there, I have a problem with bandwidth or a computer, or whatever that might be, then there's no point trying to create these mechanisms and not be able to stay up to date or keep those particular mechanisms up to date. The best would be, therefore, go on to Google AdWords and maybe pay some small amount of money and make sure that your website, create a small passive website, not necessarily a very active website. Make sure all the right information is there, a few photographs are uploaded once for all, and make sure those adverts are placed there, and put a very small cost. Don't try to outprice the big guys out there. Put a very small price, because in this case, somebody is very specifically looking for a specific kind of a product or service. All that you need to be sure is this: you are available there with that level of detail. So somebody is seeking you out. So you don't try to seek him out or her out. Just make sure your information is available. Of course, as your business grows, or you get into a particular micro market, going to the same example, you were in 3 villages. You have now created a positive word about you in the next set of 3 villages, and 15 families already know you. There are another 70 families out there. Now you have decided it's already year 1, end of year 1. Now you feel you're ready to go and start servicing the next set of 3 villages. You say, fine, let me pick up this particular village in that particular cluster, and I want to kind of send out some more maybe videos over cell phones. And maybe I decide that, okay, you know what, I'm going to create a small competition out there and pick up some 10 or 15 college going students or maybe youngsters out there, and maybe give them this particular information, give them this particular videos, and say, you know what, if you circulate these videos amongst your friends, this is what I can do for you, etc., etc. So in critical phases of your business, when you're expanding to a new location or when you're going to a new micro market, despite the fact that you may not necessarily have infinite resources, you may still choose to have inside out kind of a campaign when you're actually sending out information, whereas in the normal case, you may not probably do that. So yes, just to take you to the next level of detail, the default options today for social media is, of course, the Facebooks and the Twitters and the Pinterest. And I'm sure most of you would know Instagram. A significant drift that one sees today is, especially in the micro markets, small businesses, agri space, the text and the written world is actually losing sway. Twitter, for example, is also a very text-based social platform. It doesn't really give you the kind of traction which for all that even Instagram kind of gives. So yes, the social platforms are definitely a easy way to kind of get started. Most of the users of any business, whether large, small, doesn't matter which product, doesn't matter which geography, generally speaking, they are on social platforms for their own very reasons. Most people are on Facebook for their own reasons. Most people are on Pinterest for their own reasons. Most people are on Instagram for their own reasons. But once again, the same caution. I may be on Instagram for entertainment. I may be on Instagram for all sorts of reasons. So I'm competing for a larger attention span out there. So it's not that easy to get a targeted attention span in these spaces. However, for whatever reasons, if one chooses to be on social platforms, it may be nice to actually have more of visual content than text-based content. That's number one. Second is, especially in regions like Asia or maybe India, wherein the same geography, there will be multiplicity of languages. And therefore, you walk 5 kilometers, a different language crops up. You walk 15 kilometers, a different written text crops up. You can't keep creating translations of the same content. So the best approach in these cases would be photographs, because photographs generally tend to be language neutral. So yes, social platforms is one particular space. Purely for an academic reason, I do wish to share some insight into what exactly is content marketing. But again, for the small business, especially the agri-business, the rural business, content marketing, especially the written content marketing or conceptual approaches such as putting out white papers, etc., may not necessarily be the most relevant way of digital marketing. However, if I look at content as a video of a customer who is telling me how good a person you are, how genuine a person you are, or how good you are in responding to a complaint I make, then that's also content. So one has to be very clear as to what is the definition of content in the particular space I'm operating in. And many times, despite the fact that content marketing is not considered to be the preferred option for small businesses and rural spaces, one may be surprised as to how the same content marketing can actually create wonders in that very same spaces. I talked about the outside-in approach, the concepts like Google AdWords, so on and so forth. So yes, so there are different ways in which I can make myself visible. But once again, the caveat over here is, if I am operating in a particular space and I wish to make myself visible in that particular space, optimizations work best if that particular space already has certain degree of adoption of digital marketing or digital spaces. So if there aren't enough smartphones in the area, if there aren't enough people who are adopting, if there is enough bandwidth availability in that particular area, then it may or may not give the best benefits. So of course, the default options in optimization space are keywords. For example, staying with a particular example, if somebody is looking for a technical person who can repair their tractors, then if you can replicate tractors, whatever this particular skill sets, geography, etc., if you can identify those keywords, and if you can make sure those keywords are attached to your particular website, and if they are kind of tagged to a particular Google AdWords account, that's at a very simplistic level, it's nothing more than that. There is another upcoming space which is called as metadata. Metadata actually is also sort of keywords, but then the idea is, what are these keywords used for? I'll take an example from Instagram, which is photographs. At a very simplistic level, all of us, I'm sure, would be understanding what Instagram is. Instagram is just a platform for sharing photographs. Very recently, it's also become a platform for sharing videos. Now, if I take a photograph itself has lots of metadata. For example, what is a metadata? It's nothing but tags that can be attached to a photograph. For example, I have taken a photograph which may be in a village, which is of a sunrise, or which is a photograph of a cow, or it could be a photograph, or it could be a photograph taken in this particular geography, or it could be a photograph taken by a particular kind of camera. Now, many times, people may be searching for this metadata for their own reasons. If I'm intelligent enough to play on those metadata and see if my own business can go and sit on that particular metadata. For example, I'm an agripreneur who breeds cows, who brings out good quality cows, which give good quantum of milk, let's say. If I pick up good photographs and place it out there in Instagram, but if I can give certain kind of metadata, which even many other people who may or may not necessarily be seeking to buy a cow, but if in their searches, if the right metadata props up my photograph, it becomes so much easier for my information to ride on the networks and be more visible for another searcher who may still want that particular information. So yes, it tends to be a bit complex, but however, the potential is very high. At some point in time, especially if once the businesses have gone through the initial 3 or 4, 5 years, wherein you're not struggling for the first set of cash flows, this could be a good way to enhance generic visibility. Again, the caution is it's generic visibility. If you wish to have a very specific visibility in a particular geography from a particular kind of customer, metadata may have its own limitations. And of course, email marketing. Email marketing is once again targeted to a very specific set of customers. It presumes that I know a particular kind of customers who have interests, and within them they may have different kind of sub interests, so on and so forth. And I send out information to them, or they may be interested about my own experiences or my own businesses and how I'm growing, and maybe what kind of new products or services I'm bringing in. And it could be something as simple as static information being shared, saying, you know what, I was operating from village 1, 2, and 3. You like my services from village 1 and 2, 3. By the way, from next September, I'm offering my services in village 4, 5, and 6. So if you have your family members or friends out there and you have experienced me in village 2 and 3, just inform them that I'm now available at village 4, 5, and 6, and maybe you can use me. But once again, email marketing usually works when the individuals necessarily have the habit of going into email. Generally speaking, email as a medium itself has been losing its charm, especially for non-business purposes. So one has to be a bit wary of those. Of course, we have the standard, the traditional, moving into the digital space wherein we can use the whole digital strategy for branding. And once again, this is for a long term, which is for a generic rub-off. It's not necessarily for a specific rub-off. Unless, of course, if you're launching your product in a new country or a new geography, or you're launching an entirely new product, there may be certain nuances. But then I would kind of keep it at this level of detail and get into depth on any particular option, depending on if there's a follow-on query. The next set of detail I may wish to kind of bring to this conversation, while we have gone through many of these items which listed in this particular table, I do wish to emphasize a bit on influencer marketing. Influencer marketing especially is very, very powerful and potent in case of small businesses, and especially for rural businesses. Reason being, in rural businesses, the communities are very close-knit. The bad news as well as good news does travel, and it does travel fast. So yes, while traditional businesses have tried to build brands by using icons or maybe glamorous individuals, surprisingly the same approach is available even for the small business person. And if I can pick up 2 or 3 well-wishers who have liked me, who have liked my business, who have liked my product, who have liked my service, and if I equip them with the right content and tell them how you can help me, then this influencer marketing approach tends to be very, very effective. And actually, it's quite cost effective as well. So let me let me just go to the next slide also, and then kind of pause to see if there are any other questions at this point in time. So yes, while all the things that have been said is true, there are a few best practices. It will be good if we remember them. Today, anybody who gets into digital marketing more or less has reconciled to the fact that if we keep the platform centered around the mobile, it may be the best investment of money, purely for the sake of convenience and purely for the sake purely for the fact that the capacity and the capability of the mobile itself has been increasing many folds every 6 months, and the desktop is no more the preferred medium. So yes, if at any point in time the young and the small businesses wish to get onto digital, it may be always good to start with mobile. It would always be good to have a interactive presence versus a static presence. Even if it could be as simple as providing information to a specific question and not just putting a static website out there, something as simple as that. I already mentioned about how video and visual is the preferred option. Chances are very soon we may see a Facebook which has no text and is just about video. It becomes another Instagram. Geo-targeting, in the sense that which geographies, and mobile allows brilliant geo-targeting because of the facility of GPS, and it's, even something as simple as a photograph that you post out there, you can actually geo-tag it, and that increases its selectivity and who gets to see that particular photograph. And yes, as I said, precision is very important. There's no need to be visible at all spaces. One tends to get into this this tendency to kind of spread wide. But as we said, timing is very important to make sure why are we doing this, who are we trying to influence, when are we trying to influence, and therefore it's always good to go to those spaces where we need immediate results and not try to be there everywhere. So it's not a generic brand exercise, but it's a very transactional exercise. Next is manage expectations. Now, these expectations is not about managing expectations of the customer. It's expectations of the entrepreneur himself or herself as to what do you think digital marketing will achieve for you over the next 1, 2, or 3 months, and which spaces and to what extent. I think that's very important. Having very realistic and brutally realistic expectation as to what can digital marketing achieve for us is probably a very important element which many young entrepreneurs tend to miss. Influencers, as I always said, that more often than not, the young entrepreneurs tend to miss the fact that brand icons can be available even for young, small businesses. It's just that it may be a villager, not necessarily a movie star. And this is something one needs to actively consider. And yes, timing. If video is not the end thing, please don't use video. If the community has not got comfortable with the fact that I want to be videographed and my message wants to go across, or maybe religion may have an impact. For example, in particular kind of faiths, people may feel offended as to why do you video record me and why are you sending me video recording of another person? So please don't use that. So many times it will be very important to know whether that particular content, that particular medium, that particular manner of messaging, or for all that matter, I may choose to rhyme it with a particular trend, for example, football, and maybe I may choose to send out a message somehow it is integrated and dovetailed with the whole idea of football. So staying with the time and the trend and timing the trend is a very, very key success factor, especially in content-based digital marketing. I wish to share 2 examples, one from a rural setup and one from I would say, a small business setup. The first story is about a village. It's a very small village, and though this particular story incident is roughly about 7 years old, and this particular setting was close to the capital of the country, India, yet it was a rural setup. And even the young generation out there, many of them were first-time school goers. It was not necessarily that education, despite the fact that they were close to a large city, education had really not seeped into the community, despite the fact that they were seeing malls and large complexes, being created right next door, but they had really not been part of the economic growth story at various points in time. So in this community, food was cooked in the houses using wood as fuel, basically fallen trees or forest wood, or at best, if there was coal available, then you use that wood to kind of heat up the coal and then used to have a coal-fired sort of a stove. And of course, it was a very inefficient way of cooking. It was a very time-taking process, of course, and then the whole hygiene issues, health issues of the smoke, and etc., so on and so forth. So now the question was, the rest of the country, if you look at people who had resources, who had access, how were they cooking food in their houses? So they were using what was called as LPG, liquefied petroleum gas. So it's called as, some other rest of the world, some other parts of the world, it's called as methane gas or whatever that might be, yeah, or compressed natural gas, depends on which type of fuel that you're using. But it was essentially smokeless, very efficient way of cooking, in which you could cook food in closed doors inside high-end apartments as well. And the question was, why could this not be done in the village? And so is it issue of money? Is it an issue of who gets it done? Is it an issue of service provider? Or is it about how to go ahead with it? Or is it just nobody never thought about it? Yeah. And so what will be there are two elements. One is the marketing part and another is the digital marketing part. So I would like to indulge in both parts quickly though. So there were these 300 women who came together at one particular place, and incidentally, I had the opportunity to talk to them. So I actually told them, how long do you take to cook, and so, 45 minutes, 1 hour, etc., and therefore, how much time will the gas need to burn? Therefore, how much gas do you need in a month, and therefore, how many cylinders do you need to purchase in a month? How many stores, etc. So we worked out all the numbers, and of course it came to a particular number wherein the first response was, this is a number which is a bit unaffordable and therefore we will not be able to do. I said, fine, all right. So we said, if suppose we set up a service station, we pick up a house, a compound, and we set up 10 gas stoves over there, and all of them are gas fired. And all that we're going to do is we're going to assign slots from morning 9 o'clock to 11:30, and then evening 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. These are the two windows where you kind of cook your food. So, if we give you slots, will you be able to do it? They said, no, it's a bit difficult. How will you manage? How will you cut vegetables? So we had lots of the conversation. Finally, we realized that if the preparation time is much more than the time for which that particular utensil sits on the gas stove. So finally, we all came to this conclusion that it's possible. It's very doable. So we worked out the economics. And then to everybody's surprise, they said the economics is also very doable. And then we said, by the way, the way you sustain this is each of you pay particular amount of maybe 10 rupees per hour. 10 rupees per hour is just roughly about 1/7 of a dollar. So they said, yeah, it's very affordable. So now the question is, how do we do it? Why are we not doing it? So we broke it down to saying, okay, how do you go about doing it? What are the 10 things that you need to do to get started? And therefore, who does that? So when they know these are 10 things that you've done, they realize anybody can do it. So cutting a long story short, finally the service station was set up and it started operating. Okay, so where did digital marketing come in? Because this was done as a part of a larger initiative. So there was this big social enterprise. Incidentally, I was a board member of that particular entity. And we were trying to see how to solve this problem. So here's what we did. So once this whole community started operating and the gases were on live and the food was being cooked, we just took a photograph. In that photograph, we had the ladies of the village. And the photograph was circulated to some clusters of villages. Not even that. These photographs were taken to another state in India, which was roughly about 1,400 kilometers away. A different language, a different community. But the photographs are taken. So you took printouts of these photographs and you kind of put it on the village walls. And within a matter of time, that particular village also has its own cooking service station. The point is, this is a behavior. So what was marketed over here, it is digital marketing. It's just a video, it's just a photograph. If the medium is print, fine, or else it could be also on a mobile phone, doesn't matter. But the fact that a photograph speaks, the moment somebody sees a photograph wherein everything is already being done, none of those questions or resistances remain valid anymore. And that's how the behavior changed. There was a good amount of clarity as to what are we trying to do in this whole marketing exercise. We are just trying to convey one simple statement. It is possible. That's it. Nothing else. We are not trying to tell them the economics. We are not trying to tell them the money it requires. We're not trying to tell them the time it takes. All that we're saying is, see this photograph, they all look like you. They have all the same reasons that you could have offered to them as to why it's not possible. And here's what it's already done. So that's a very straightforward, simple, very powerful way in which the resistances could be demolished almost overnight. That's one story. And we absolutely attribute it to one simple photograph. Of course, we took some 5 or 6 photographs, not just one, and a couple of videos, because when people got very curious and when everybody congregated, we ran those videos. And of course, there was a language problem. We said, fine, we interpreted that. But then people understand emotions, people understand the emotion, the tone of the message, and even if they don't understand language, and the whole problem was solved. So this one very simple, short, powerful story that I was very keen to share. Next is something which I was very closely associated with, and I set it up in India in 2006, and I had the opportunity to stay with the growth story for almost 12 years, from 2006 all the way to 2017. And this was a non-profit in the space of education, wherein we had to go into the classrooms of right from grade 5 all the way up to grade 12, and we had to show them a connect of what they're learning in the classroom to what is happening in the real world out there. So we had to give them a purpose for education. We had to give them what is understanding of what is work, how is work done, what do you need to know in that particular workplaces, what kind of decisions you take, and therefore what kind of experience and wisdom you need to have, what kind of knowledge you need to have, how much of that knowledge comes from classroom, and therefore how should you connect what you're studying and reading in your classrooms today to this particular story. Now, obviously, the story has to be communicated with somebody who's working in those industries, who come and sit in that particular classroom and talk to the youngster in a manner and in a simplicity which the youngster is able to understand. Now, one of the biggest resistance we used to face was everybody who used to hear the story and who used to hear as to what is it we're asking them to do. They used to feel that this is a great story. This is great. This needs to be done. But I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do it because I'm a bit afraid. So there used to be this whole resistances. So here's what we did. Cutting once again a long story short, we had to break resistances because we wanted more individuals from the corporates to come and sit in the classroom and have a communication with the students. So what we did was, after the first or second year, when we had enough number of people, and we actually picked up 15 or 16 corporates, we made sure that there are at least 5 or 6 individuals from each of the 15 or 16 corporates who had actually gone to the classroom. We recorded videos of them. When we ran the debrief sessions, they used to have the same anxieties. So we recorded them. And when they actually landed up in the classroom after 1 year later, and we recorded what their experiences were, and we showed that particular transition, and we also showed the photographs of those individuals actually sitting in the classroom and conducting those sessions. And when we hit those points, when we had those particular stories, then we took these videos and these photographs to other corporates and to more employees in the same corporates, and that's what turned around this whole particular story. So it was a digital marketing pitch. It was not necessarily through a website, it was not necessarily through a mobile phone, but yes, we took all these and we kind of showed them on the projectors at the right point in time. So the first example I know it was photographs and videos true, but it was about telling them, conveying the statement that it's possible. Whereas in the second story, it's not that anybody thought it was not possible. It is just that we conveyed to them that it was already done. In a way, this is similarity with the earlier story as well, but it's just that we chose a particular timing, and the timing was when somebody from their own company had already done it, where they knew this person from all of the previous experiences, and when we could show a story through that particular person, that is when we started marketing. So that's the timing we decided to choose. These are the two examples I wish to share as to how digital marketing can actually be used in very simple businesses wherein there are no resources whatsoever, and yet you can actually have an impact. In fact, in JA, within the 6th or 7th year operation, we used to have almost 8,500 to 10,000 volunteers from as many as 35 corporates. We used to run simultaneous programs for almost 100,000 students every year in as much as 800 to 900 schools. That was the extent to which this whole simple tool could actually make JA India a success story. So that's the sum total of what I wish to share on this topic of digital marketing, especially for small businesses in the agri-rural space. I have one more slide on what more can digital encompass, but let me take a pause here and let me just open this session to question and answers.
Hi, Venkat. It's Chinwe.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah,
So,
I'm really, really grateful for the approach that you've taken on this. And unfortunately, we don't have as many of our entrepreneurs with us, and that's probably why you're not getting so many questions. The good news is that we're recording it, and I'm sure that they will definitely benefit from it. I have several takeaways that I've been jotting, and
okay.
one of them is like basically going back to the basics and the power of very simple technology such as videos and photographs, and how you can, because a lot of times we think about digital marketing and we're thinking about, you know, the very global high tech type of activities, and those high tech activities started from these basics that you're talking about. And I really enjoyed that, and I've actually taken some points for some things that I'm working on.
Okay.
um, the other thing is the other takeaway that I have is um, the the idea of making yourself visible, right? That you don't always have to find your client, but if you make yourself visible through using the right metadata, as you say, then the clients can find you.
Yes.
I think that's another powerful element that I think and I hope that, you know, our entrepreneurs have caught. So it was really just giving feedback as some of the things that I've taken out and that I'm very excited about. So thank you.
I think
Thank you,
Stan
Chindu.
had a question
Yeah.
he would like to ask.
So I wanted to ask, for example, let me use myself as a typical example.
Mm-hmm.
So personally, I don't like taking pictures. So,
Yes.
and we have a social media page that is run by the other team and the marketing team, and sometimes they try to take pictures and other, but then it has come to a level where you have to take, once it's an SME and you're growing now, you sell your brand. And some people who are also associated with you, also you sell yourself, then you sell the brand to them. So in our way, we work the two ways. But how do you do social media as an entrepreneur if you don't like taking pictures and all that? Since social media in our part really sells with images, and people desires to know who is behind the images.
Yes. Yeah. Well, yes, that's a very valid concern. And in fact, I had mentioned my presentation itself. At times, people may not, especially they may be religious beliefs, or even may not be, it could just not be something religious, it could just be personal preferences, wherein people may not wish to get photographed, or it could be something simple. I may not have the wherewithal to take photographs and put it out there. Well, there are two things. Social media, let's keep the technology away. Let's go with the words. Social, it's about person to person. Social,
Definitely.
simple. Yeah, number one. Second, media. Medium is, I need to communicate. What's the purpose of the medium? I need to communicate a message. Now, frankly, in the small business space, especially in agri space, if I am into what's called as a micro community, I actually meet my customers every day. My customers meet my potential customers also every day in person. So frankly, I do not need what I call it as a time recording of an experience, in the sense that neither do I need a photograph, neither do I need a video. In fact, if you look at this whole community-based gas station, when we broke ice in the first cluster of villages, we spoke with a group of 300 women one on one in front of them. And now the reason why did those 300 women have confidence and listen to somebody who had come into the village for the first time? Because I came with somebody else whom they knew for the last 15 years. So they had that trust of that other person in another organization, which used to come to that cluster for 15 years for various other reasons. And when I came along with that person and spoke one-on-one with those 300 individuals, so I didn't have any photograph, I didn't have a voice recording, I just went there. Simple as that. So many times, this is a benefit which large businesses do not have. This is the benefit which only small businesses have. So this may not actually be constrained. In fact, In fact, wherever you have the privilege to go and communicate the story in person, or even the influencer can communicate in person. If I can speak to 5 village elder people and say that, come into my cow shed, or come into my cattle shed, or come into my milk processing unit, let's walk. I want to show you what we are doing. And if those 5 senior gentlemen feel respected and say, this is a good youngster, he's doing good for the village, we think we need to go and tell about this boy to the rest of the villagers. That's great enough.
Okay.
So that's the reason why many times digital marketing tends to be a bit enticing. Kind of many times people tend to feel that we're being left out. Many times we don't realize. That's the reason I always said influencer. A digital medium makes it easy. Tomorrow, if you want to convey this message to maybe 4 more villages or another cluster of villages where you have not gone there personally or physically, yes, medium helps. But then just because you cannot take a photograph, the bigger component, which is an influencer and the person-to-person one-on-one communication that we have, that is much more precious than any digital marketing solution can ever give you.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. And I appreciate the cons. As you said, I think for me, one of the natural things has been being with the end user, the customer, when he
Absolutely.
expresses the
Yeah.
emotional feeling of after using the product, how it was, and other things. That alone put joy and smiles on my faces. And I'm more
Absolutely.
happier and more happier with that. And that creates a memory for me because that makes me feel that indeed I've met the need of a customer and there's a more emotional connection, which is key for me because once I build an emotional connection with a customer, we fall
Yeah.
in love and there is word of mouth sales and repetitions of sales. Unlike the where people take pictures and share online and other things. So thank you
Yes,
so much.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm 100% with you on that. That is what exactly I would have loved to do. Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very much insightful and it helps me a lot. I have another business which is not an agri business, but we are very much visible on social media for that business, and that is pretty much easier for the agribusiness. Our visibility on social media is low and makes it very difficult to even attract funding and all of that. So I think that one of the important lessons I've learned today is about visibility, being visible. Thank you very much. You made a point about digital marketing, saying that it is a short term. It's usually a short term, even though it must be in the long term framework. I want to ask this particular question. For instance, in our agribusiness, I have a cattle farm. Now, what we are doing now is that we are, we are rearing at the same time. We are retailing. So what we do is that we go to the north, get some of the matured stock, and then put our markup on it and still come and sell it. That is easier for us. That is better because it makes it, it makes it easier for you to get some returns, yeah. Now, we want to go into processing in the nearest future. However, since we have not started processing, can we begin to show those things? Can we begin to show some of the long-term things that we'll be doing? Or it may, another way, there is the fear that perhaps once you begin to put those things there, clients may begin to come in and they may dab you as serious when they come and you're unable to supply. I don't know how we able to balance that so well using digital marketing. Can you help us with that? Thank you.
There was a great amount of disturbance in the line, but I think I've captured the primary concern. Uh, uh, in fact, there was another slide wherein I was very keen to take the conversation slightly beyond digital marketing and get into the space of digital. But if I've heard your question and right, there are two responses I wish to share. Uh, Digital marketing is about conveying a story, and it need not necessarily be to customers alone, especially when we're doing fundraising. So, for example, I'm also a venture investor. We invest into 13 portfolio companies. We do keep getting proposals, and many times, uh, if suppose I'm a processor, for example, one of our industry companies is manufactures low cost 3D printers. Tomorrow, if I need to, so they are not about 3D printing as much as manufacturing 3D printers. Now, what is it that they have done in the manufacturing process because of which the cost of 3D printing has come down? Now, one option is I can take them through a 3-hour story and tell them as to why this whole story is credible and why this has happened and why they need to invest in me. Versus, if I make a 8-minute video and I send this as a podcast to somebody who's on an aeroplane, and this investor can actually view it in his or her convenience in the flight, it tells the whole story. But technically, this is actually digital, this is marketing that particular investment story to a potential investor. And so many times you can actually take this route. It's not a customer, but it could be potentially an investor. So that's what I always said. The purpose of the marketing has to be very, very clear. The definition of success has to be very, very clear. That's number one. Second is digital marketing. If any reason, if you're not able to include the marketing component, then you can take away the marketing and still keep it digital, all the while understanding that even digital alone has certain marketing impact. And I will explain to you how. For example, if the manner in which an order is placed on the number of milk packets I need tomorrow, or if there's a local milk vendor who has 50 cows and he goes to 100 houses, and in these 100 houses he supplies milk. Now suddenly he supplies milk to my house as well, let's say. Now suddenly there's a travel plan that has come up, and for the next 3 days I'm traveling. Now this travel plan has come up in the evening, and he is to come to my house tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. Now how do I communicate this to this person? Even something as simple as having a cell phone where you can communicate stop or go, or even a simple app could actually create, or even, let me go even more basic. This guy actually sends a photograph of the invoice on WhatsApp to me. Now, many times, even a simple transaction on a digital medium, which is not exactly marketing, is just a transaction. It's convenience, agreed. But there is a rub-off. If this person is efficient enough to actually click a photograph, or he is giving me an option to actually ask him to stop supplying milk at my home for the next 3 days at a 4-hour notice or at a 10-hour notice, dead in the night or late in the evening, it has a positive rub-off even into the marketing. I'm actually having a goodwill about the efficiency of this guy. May not be at the product or the service. So many times, if we use digital even for enabling the business and very basic stuff, we are not really trying to talk of automation. We're only talking of convenience, very simple, easy way of making simple transactions. Many times, even this can have a positive rub-off on the general perception of the business itself.
Okay, thank you.
So, if for positive time, I just want to Chinvi, if it's okay, it might be possible, and especially when I have interacted with entrepreneurs in earlier occasions, it becomes a bit difficult for many times the questions to come up at that point, or many times youngsters have questions later on. So if anybody wants to even pose a question on an email, I'll be more than happy to respond in email as well.
That's very kind of you, Venkat, and I know that they would all appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, Venkat, for that insightful presentation. And I'm sure the agripreneurs that are able to join us today really appreciate the information that you have shared. It's unfortunate that we're not able to get a lot of them online, but thankfully, because we are recording, a number of them will be able to watch the recording on our website, and we'll be able to follow up with questions that hopefully we'll be able to address in subsequent webinars as well. In the interest of time, I think we would want to end here, because we also want to be respectful of the time of those who have joined us. But I would want to close out by reminding the entrepreneurs that our next session is going to be next month, and that one will be on the 29th of August, which is the last Wednesday of August, and it will be focusing on financial management tips. You will be receiving more information about that in the coming months. And I also want to share another announcement. I think you might have also received an email of an opportunity to connect with investors as part of the Africa Green Revolution Forum. This is an opportunity that the Secretariat is putting together, trying to connect agripreneurs to potential investors. And you can follow the link that we sent to you to register for that opportunity. And those that are successful, the Secretariat is prepared to sponsor you to attend the AGRF, where you'll be able to interact with potential investors for your business. So we encourage those that are eligible to go ahead and apply for that. And then lastly, we will be sending you a short survey because we want to be able to serve you well. So your feedback on how well we can improve the webinar is important to us. So please take a few minutes of your time to complete the survey that will be coming to you so that we can serve you well. So if there are no other questions or comments, I want to thank you all again for coming, for making time to join us. And we look forward to reconnecting with you again next month on the 29th of August.
And thank you again, Venkat. And thank you to all our team members and all the entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Kwame. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much.